You're not behind in life. Here's what's actually happening. 6 months ago, a woman named Sarah, though this happens to thousands of people every single day, sat in her car outside her apartment for 20 minutes because she couldn't make herself go inside and open Instagram again. Her sister had just posted a house closing. A friend from college posted a promotion. Someone she barely remembers from high school posted an engagement. 3 notifications, 90 seconds, and she felt like her entire life had quietly failed while she wasn't looking. Here's what she did instead of spiraling for the rest of the night. And it's the same thing I want you to do. The next time this happens to you, she opened her notes app and wrote down one honest sentence. What has actually happened in my life in the last 2 years that I've been ignoring because it didn't come with a photo? 15 minutes later, she had a list. A toxic job she'd finally left, a body she'd rebuilt after an injury, doctors said might be permanent, a friendship she'd repaired after 2 years of silence. None of it was Instagram shaped. All of it was real. That's the entire fix. And I'm going to spend the next few minutes showing you exactly why it works and how to use it in the 4 situations where this feeling shows up the most. Let's start with what behind actually means, because the word gets thrown around constantly, but almost nobody defines it. Behind implies there's a single timeline everyone is supposed to be running on, a shared schedule for careers, relationships, home ownership, self-actualization, and that falling off pace on any one of those means something has gone wrong. But that timeline doesn't exist. It never did. It's a fiction built out of thousands of individual comparisons, stitched together until it feels like an objective standard, when really it's just noise. Here's the first real situation, the one closest to Sarah's. You're in your 30s, still renting, still single, watching friends settle into things you thought you'd have by now. The temptation is to treat that as proof of failure, but look closer at what actually happened during those years. Maybe you left a career that was quietly destroying you, spent 2 years retraining into something sustainable, and now you're building a life that will hold up long term, instead of collapsing at 40, the way it would have if you'd stayed the course everyone expected. That's not behind. That's a different route. The psychologist Erikson, who spent decades studying how people develop across an entire lifespan, made a point worth remembering here. Psychological growth doesn't run on a fixed calendar. It happens in stages. People move through at their own pace, shaped by their own circumstances. Forcing yourself onto someone else's timeline doesn't speed up growth. It just produces anxiety without producing progress. The fix, like Sarah's, is the same. Write down what actually happened, not what it should have looked like. Here's a second situation, and it's quieter, so it's easy to miss. You've actually built a decent life. Steady job, decent relationships, reasonable health, but you still feel this low hum of dissatisfaction, like you should be further along, even though you can't quite explain further along toward what. This has a name. The reference point keeps moving. Every time you hit a goal, your brain quietly resets the bar and starts measuring you against the new one, so the feeling of enough never arrives. The fix isn't to achieve more. It's to deliberately notice what you've already built on a schedule, not just when something goes wrong. Once a week, write down 3 things true about your life now that weren't true 2 years ago, not to perform gratitude, just to correct a brain that's been moving the finish line without telling you. Here's a third situation. You compare your career to a sibling's or a close friend's, and it stings more than a stranger's success ever would. That extra sting isn't random. Proximity makes comparison sharper. The people closest to your starting point feel like the most valid comparison, so their success reads as clear evidence of your own shortfall. But closeness in starting point doesn't mean closeness in path. 2 people can start in the same house, go to the same school, and still need completely different amounts of time to get somewhere solid. The fix here is small but specific. When you catch yourself comparing to someone close to you, name one material difference in your circumstances, even just in your head. A health issue, a financial start, a relationship that took years to recover from. Not to make excuses, to correct the illusion that you were ever running an identical race. Here's a fourth one, probably the most common. You look at your career specifically and feel like you should have made it by now, whatever that means. And the pressure is starting to affect decisions. You're taking jobs out of panic instead of judgment, saying yes to things that don't fit because the clock feels like it's running out. Seneca wrote about this exact anxiety 2,000 years ago in a letter about the shortness of life. But his point wasn't that time is scarce, so panic and grab whatever you can. His point was the opposite. Most people don't actually have too little time. They waste enormous amounts of it on things that don't matter, and only notice near the end how much they've spent carelessly. The lesson isn't urgency, it's attention. If you're behind on anything, it's usually behind on paying attention to how you're spending your days, not behind on some external schedule. Fix the attention, and the panic-driven decisions tend to disappear on their own. Notice the pattern underneath all four of these, because it's the same pattern every time. Sarah's included. The feeling of being behind almost never comes from an honest accounting of your own life. It comes from measuring your life against an external reference, someone else's pace, a moving internal goalpost, a sibling's timeline, an invisible clock. And in every case, the fix wasn't to catch up faster. It was to replace the external reference with an internal one. Write down what actually happened. Notice it on a schedule. Name the real differences in your path. Pay attention to your own days. Instead of racing a clock, nobody can actually see. So here's what I want you to do this week. The same thing Sarah did in her car. Pick one area where you felt behind lately. Career, relationships, money, whatever came up while you were listening. Instead of asking, how do I catch up? Ask a different question. What has actually happened in this area of my life over the past 2 years? And was any of it useful? Even if it doesn't look like progress from the outside, write the honest answer down. Most of the time, you'll find movement you'd been discounting simply because it didn't come with a photo. If this video made you realize there's a part of yourself you've been ignoring, I've created a free 7-day self-discovery reset. It's designed to help you slow down, ask better questions, and understand yourself a little more clearly. You'll find it below. Subscribe, like, and comment for more. And if this one landed, watch the next one. It picks up right where this leaves off. What to do when the building gets boring, when the motivation is gone, and nobody is clapping yet. It's on the screen now. You are not behind. You're on a timeline nobody else can see, built out of decisions and setbacks and quiet progress that don't show up in a 2-second glance at someone else's life. Stop measuring your chapter against someone else's highlight reel and start actually reading your own book. If this gave you something to sit with, hit like. It helps this reach more people sitting in their own version of that car outside their apartment. And if you're new here, subscribe, because I put out videos like this every week on identity, psychology, and becoming who you actually are. I want to know, which of these 4 situations hit closest to home for you? The delayed timeline, the moving goalpost, the sibling comparison, or the career panic? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. Question everything. Become yourself.